Hey, weirdos, I'm Ash.
And I'm Elena.
And this is Morbid!
It's Morbid!
It's Morbid in the... What time is it?
Mid-morning.
It's afternoon. It's 12.
Early afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't really have a song for that.
It's Morbid on an afternoon.
Whoa.
It doesn't slap.
All right. I mean, we can work on it. We can
Yeah.
kind of workshop that a
I
little
have
bit.
heartburn, so
Yeah.
I feel like it's limiting me right now.
She's living in an Alka-Seltzer world right now, so.
You know, you're about to turn 27 and then you just can't put hot sauce on your eggs anymore.
Everything just falls apart.
Like, what the fuck? I literally have, the only thing I've eaten today is my little breakfast burrito that I made, which slapped.
But you had hot sauce.
But I put the tiniest little bit of hot sauce on it and I can't take it anymore.
You're living in a angry tummy world, you know?
I know.
Unfortunately.
My Tum's fine. It's just my esophagus that's being a little bitch.
Because of your tum.
Well,
Tum's
maybe I
just
need like...
spurting that acid right back up there.
Yeah, I don't like it. Remember when we looked into like what heartburn really is?
Yeah, it's a little scary when you really look at what it is.
We won't get into it right now, but you guys should look into it yourselves if you
Look it
want
up.
to. Look it up.
Fuck yourselves up and look at it.
It's pretty gross. It involves fermentation, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of really gross things that happen in your gut.
What are you doing over there?
I'm just fixing a wire because it was in my face and I felt like I was getting slapped by a wire.
That's kind of funny. The wire.
Because I'm trying to drink my coffee.
Yeah, you drink your coffee while I drink my fucking Alka-Seltzer over here.
I'll drink my tiramisu coffee.
I feel, yummy. From Dead Sled.
Yeah, from Dead Sled.
Check that out.
Yummy.
I have a flavor to try later. I hope that my heartburn goes away so that I can try it.
I hope you can too.
Because I love Dead Sled coffee.
Who doesn't?
TM.
TM. I love TM like
It's
that's
another
ours.
company.
Somebody else owns
I'm
that.
like, only I can love them.
Just me.
I own the love of them.
You know, why not?
Well, what's up, man?
What's up? What's up is
That's what I
that
said.
we're going back in time today
What?
to my favorite kinds of things, which is old-timey things.
You love old-timey things. Where is it in Europe?
No, it is not.
America?
It's in America, and it's in, our neck of the woods a little bit.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay.
at least a little bit.
Okay.
You could drive there, I guess.
Okay.
So it's there. So this is a wild one. It has to do with, how shitty the death penalty is and how really shitty it was back then.
Okay.
It has to do with mental illness and how it was handled back then.
Not well, bitch.
And it has to do with whether or not somebody was executed for a crime they potentially didn't commit. So it's a big one.
Okay. That always stresses me out a little bit.
This one's
Well,
a
a lot.
lot. I will say this one's a
jinx.
lot. So hang in. So
Where?
we're going to be talking about Elroy Kent and the murder of Delia Congdon.
Okay.
Now, Elroy Kent is our convicted murderer
Okay.
here. So I want to talk about him first just because he's the one that we're going to talk about Delia, of course. But I just want to bring up Elroy because you should know what we're working with here and why it was such a shock that he eventually receives the death penalty.
Okay.
Because, whoa, he had a lot going on. So Elroy Kent was born in Rutland County, Vermont in 1878. He was born to George and Caroline Kent. According to the 1880 census, he had one sister, Belle Kent, but later he would end up having 6 more siblings.
Oh,
It's
shit.
a big family.
That census really popped off.
It really did. But for back then, that was just like,
Normal.
that's a family.
Yeah, that was like having 2 kids.
Exactly. So Kent himself said that he always hated school when he was younger. He was kind of a troublemaker. He couldn't really focus, and he would run away from home a lot. And he probably just to get some peace and quiet.
For real.
But each time he did this, he would either be tracked down by the local constable and just returned back to the family, or he would just take it upon himself to come home. He was like, I never really ran away for a long time. I just did it all the time. Now, exactly. Now, when he did bother to show up at home or school, he spent a lot of time, like I said, getting in trouble. He liked to prank people. He just liked to cause havoc. He liked to cause a lot of trouble for people.
Okay.
Once he actually set fire to a neighbor's plow when he was younger, like a kid.
That's a dick move.
And it was being stored in the man's barn. And he only intended to do it. This is why, like, his reasoning skills were not great, even from, like, you know, kids' reasoning skills are not great anyways, but, like, his were shockingly bad.
Okay.
Because
Evidently.
he was like, I thought this was a joke, lighting fire to this plow in a barn.
Yeah.
But, like,
We should work on your sense of humor.
Yeah, like, luckily it was caught. But if it wasn't caught, it definitely would have spread very quickly and burned the entire barn down and probably the surrounding structures.
Oh my God.
And he just, like, couldn't understand that. He was like, it's a joke, guys. Get over it.
Do you know, like, roughly how old he was?
I think when he did this, he was somewhere in, like, the 12 range.
Okay. I feel
So,
like
like, he should know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you absolutely should.
Now, not only was he a pain in the ass at this point, getting into trouble, running away all the time, just causing issues for everybody around him, but Kent's actual criminal career began way earlier than this. He began his criminal career when he was just 7 years old. Yes.
What?
At 7 years old, he and his friend from school stole a cooking stove for a hut.
How the fuck did they manage to even move a cooking stove?
No idea. And so they did that. They got caught, but he was 7, so they weren't going to, like, throw him in prison for that. They were just like, wow, that's really bad. Don't steal things.
Don't
from
steal
people."
ovens, you little
But
shit.
later, when he was in his teens, he stole a horse from a neighbor in Brookline, Vermont, and rode it for several miles, but then just jumped off it, let the horse go, and hopped a train bound for Townsend.
Okay, I feel like he's running from something.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can't really find out a lot about that. There's just not a lot about his family
Yeah, I mean,
life.
1800s.
But once he was in Townsend, he actually found work there. He found, like, short-term work chopping wood. And while he's there, he breaks into the train station at night and steals 3 mileage books that he later gave to friends and people he knew.
Okay.
Now, mileage books are books that train conductors would use to log their hours and their mileage. I know.
She
I just
motioned
I
that
motioned
like a car.
but I motioned a car wheel. Like, I was like steering wheel driving. And
Well, you don't know how to drive a train. You don't.
who
you know.
knows? Maybe I don't think they have that. But
Probably
you know,
not, but-
who am I? Who am I? That's just my
just
little
not good at
pantomime
charades.
for driving something, anything. Even though, like, a plane, I'm like, yep,
Oh,
this
God.
is how we do it.
She's really going crazy
Yeah.
on the 10 and 2 there.
Now it's like a ship's wheel. I'm like, wow. But these books were not valuable monetarily.
But like
They were
you
just
need
valuable
them.
to these drivers and to, like, administration purposes, like for administration purposes. So it was just a very strange thing to steal.
And kind of a dick move.
A very dick move.
It'd be like now if somebody stole your Google Calendar.
yeah, it's like they just stole shit that's important to you because you need it to, like,
Function.
just function
And, like,
as an
do your
adult.
job,
Like,
yeah.
it's like, that's all. And it's like, he couldn't sell those. He wasn't making any money off of them. He just stole them to be a dick. And he
Yeah.
just, you know? And they're also very clearly marked as property of the railroad. So, like, I don't know a lot of people that are going to want to take those off your hands because, like, that's bad.
right.
So they were quickly recovered, luckily.
Okay, well,
because
that's good.
people, like, that he gave them to were like, I don't want this. And would just leave it somewhere like, that's not mine.
Why would you want that?
It's just such a strange thing to do. So, and because he did this, he was quickly arrested and sentenced to 20 months in the House of Corrections. 'Cause
Damn.
that is he stole shit and he broke into a train station.
yeah.
So
Wrong.
the casual theft of a horse, which, by the way, was quickly recovered as well.
Yay.
And the theft of completely valueless mileage books. These are just, like, petty crimes in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, they're not violent, you know. Again, he's really not doing anything that he's gaining any kind of value for himself. He's just doing it
He's
to be a
just
dick.
fucking around.
And this was, like, stuff he did when he was a teenager. And it was just kind of like, okay, he's just
Elroy.
this is Elroy. This is who he is. But in 1896, when he was 18 years old, he was brought before a judge for something different. He was brought before a judge for trying to burglarize a store in Brookline,
Ooh.
which
okay.
we're starting to escalate.
Yes.
As we can see.
That's the thing. When you were saying, like, it's just like petty crime, it's like slowly going
Yeah, it's
up.
getting worse and worse. And he claimed that he was like, I did not try to rob this man's store. That wasn't my intent. He did admit to the judge that he had destroyed several of the man's beehives.
That's fucking rude.
Which again, just rude shit.
And like, wow, you're playing with fire there, buddy.
Yeah, like that's just really rude. And he
get
had broken
stung.
a light in the store. He admitted to that.
So I was just being disruptive as hell, is what you're telling me.
And what happened was his uncle ended up paying a fine and he was free to go after this. But only
Elroy.
2 months later, he was caught again trying to break into the home of a man named Royal Mars.
Yes.
His name is Royal
Yes.
Mars.
Me too.
That's
I
an
love
awesome
it.
name.
Hi, I'm Royal Mars, baby.
And you don't get away with trying to break into Royal Mars's house.
No,
I don't know if you thought you would.
I never
but
did. I never thought
I
that.
never did. I don't know why Elroy thought he could.
I was born with the knowledge that you do not attempt to break into Royal's home.
I thought we all were, to
Right?
be honest.
That's
but
what
maybe
I
that's
heard.
a more modern knowledge that we are born with. Maybe they didn't
Perhaps.
have it then. But for this one, he was sentenced to jail, and I don't know how many months because I couldn't find the exact. It just said many months.
many, many months.
Many months.
Many
However you
moons in
feel
jail.
is many. That's how many he had.
that could be anything.
Yeah. So at this point, he's just a pain in the ass. He's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
But so far, sure, he's escalating, but he's not really stealing again anything of value. He's not reselling things. He's not hurting people physically yet.
And of course, it's like the 1800s, so nobody's like, hey, what's going on
What's
with
happening?
you? Like, why are you doing this?
Why are you doing this?
Why are you taking random shit?
Because it did seem at times that the act of stealing was equally or more important as the value of items that he was stealing. It seemed like he just liked
doing it.
to do the act of breaking in somewhere, the act of stealing worthless shit that would just make someone's life like slightly inconvenient.
Right.
Like a very strange set of events.
That is weird.
But this changed in 1899 when he was 21 years old.
He said it's the brink of the 1900s.
And what's crazy to me, exactly, he's like, we're entering a new era. But what's crazy to me is he's getting older and escalating. And I'm like, so your punishment gets greater the older you get.
Yeah.
So why are you escalating your crimes so that the punishment you get is going to be far worse?
Like, de-escalate.
So he's 21 years old, 1899. And that year he was caught robbing a store in Milton, Vermont.
No, he just broke a light.
It's just broke a light. No, he stole 7 gold watches, a suit of clothes, a hat, and a pair of shoes.
And he thought he was going to get away with that?
Yeah.
Damn.
And the thing
That's a loot.
well, and this one's wild to me because while he was in the middle of robbing this store, a night watchman saw him. And the night watchman fired his double-barreled shotgun at him, hit him in the leg and the back with buckshot.
What?
I was like, whoa.
In the back, you said?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
He was left in really bad shape. And the injury from the shotgun, he had to end up being hospitalized for several weeks from it.
Wow.
But he recovered. And once he was finished healing, his crimes had earned him 3 years in the state prison in Windsor.
Straight to jail.
So they were like, you feeling good? Cool. You're going
Not
to
for
prison.
long.
So after his release from Windsor I think it was, so the timelines between these ones get a little hairy.
Well, it's so
because
old.
this was in 1899, but they say like after his release in Windsor in early 1900. So they say it was a 3-year prison stint. I'm not sure if he actually served the whole 3 years because it seems like it's about 1901, like somewhere around there that this happened.
Okay, maybe he got off for like good behavior
Yeah.
and maybe like time served in the hospital or something.
So either way, he was sentenced to the 3 years in the state prison in Windsor. He did serve some time.
Yeah.
Now, after he was released from there, he traveled to Brattleboro.
Where's that?
Brattleboro and is that in Maine?
I don't know.
Brattleboro? I need to look it up now because I need to know.
I'll vamp. I
Just vamp.
don't go to Maine that often, so I don't know a lot about it. I've been to like, I think Portsmouth
Or it's
is in
Vermont.
Maine.
It's Vermont.
Oh, okay.
We're in Vermont.
I
don't
only
know why
went to
we're-
Vermont one time.
Vermont's cool.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, we like Vermont.
Anyway.
Brattleboro, Vermont.
Okay.
So he traveled to Brattleboro and he was traveling there to visit his cousin, W.G. Kent. I always love how everyone's name back then was like W.G.
Yeah,
like
that
it
one's-
wasn't a full name.
I like it, but like it's nothing really
Yeah.
goes past Royal Mars.
No, nothing will beat that. And I obviously know that like they had real names and that those are initials.
Wait, what? They did?
Yeah. Like I'm not saying like
DW's
his name
name?
was WG. Like that's I know that, but I like how they referred to them as that.
Yeah, it's like Like DW,
Exactly.
my favorite.
Where my Arthur head's out there.
What?
So while staying with that family, his cousin, his actual family,
WG.
he learned that his cousin WG had recently got a payment of some sort of $50.
Oh, honey, big money.
Yeah, so one evening while everyone was asleep, Elroy Kent just goes through his cousin's shit looking for that money.
And you're staying
Staying
in my
in their home.
GD house, WG's house.
And he only ended up finding $12 of it.
But I'm sure he took
stole
it. Yep.
and he fled the house in the middle of the
Wow.
night.
What a shitbag. I don't know, Elroy. I don't like
I'm
you.
saying. So the next morning when WG realized my cousin has stolen all my money
Or
and that he's
$12
gone, or
of it.
$12, he reported it to the chief of police. He was like, fuck
Said,
this guy.
hello, feds. I'd like to report a crime.
He said, fuck this guy. Fuck blood.
My cousin is
care
an
about
asshole.
Like, blood is not thicker than water, my friends. It's
like
not thicker
Teresa
than money.
says,
I can tell
ready?
you that.
Blood might be thicker than water, but it's harder to clean when it spills.
Oh.
That was her fucking quote this year.
Shit.
Blood may be thicker than water, but it's harder to clean when it spills. I was like,
Whoa.
who okayed that?
You're like, damn, just casual murder references.
I was
okay.
like, Andy, what?
Shit. Wow. Okay.
Anyway.
Damn.
But like Teresa says,
Yeah. I mean, this is
WG
what
felt that.
WG felt that in his heart of hearts.
911,
So-
I'd like to report a crime.
Yeah. So the chief of police traced Elroy's movements back to his mother's house in Manchester.
Now he's getting his mama involved.
So they call Caroline Kent and they're like, hey, your son, who has been a jackass his
Yeah.
whole life and has
Get
been a
him
pain in
together.
all of our asses. He was like, we know he's there. We're like, traced him here. And Caroline was like, no, he's not home.
She's aiding and abetting.
But oops, because they searched the home and they found him hiding in the basement.
Oh my God, it's giving Goodfellas.
Right? And he was taken to Newfane jail. So by the time he was sent to Newfane for taking $12 out of his cousin's belongings.
Yeah. Oh wait, also I meant Blow, not Goodfellas.
There
Don't
you
yell
go.
at me.
That's okay. I'm sure in Goodfellas somebody hid in a basement. I,
think-
love
yeah,
that
probably.
movie.
I do too.
But Kent had become kind of a notorious local criminal, but like mainly due to this like myth he had created around himself. Like,
Right.
because like we're saying, he did some shit,
But it wasn't like cray cray.
but it was all more like head scratching shit.
Bless you, Mikey.
Mikey sneezed.
It was a cute one.
it was.
It's okay.
You do not have to
God
be
damn
sorry.
it, Mikey. Shut up.
How dare you?
There's no sneezing in the workplace.
Unpublish this episode. Fuck it.
Ruined it.
So, like I said, he's not all his shit that he's doing is more just like chin scratching, head scratching, I'm confused by him kind of shit, more less than like, wow, he's like physically harming people and like
nobody's afraid of him
violent.
necessarily.
Yeah, like it's more just people are like, oh my God, it's that Elroy Kent. He's kooky.
Put your $50 away.
But and according to a news report from January 1902, it said Kent has a dark record. He knows it and does not hesitate to talk about it. Indeed, he relates his experiences on occasions with considerable gusto.
Ooh, gusto.
So they're
I
basically
love
like,
that
that man loves to talk about his shit. Like he's
doesn't?
just running around being like, yes, dark
Yes,
past, dark passenger, that's me. But by the time he was in his early 20s, he had been arrested and jailed at least 6 times at this point.
Damn.
And had spent more than a quarter of his life locked up for petty crimes. All of it.
Damn.
So he kind of looked at jail stretches as just like inconvenient at this
Yeah.
point. And he also just kind of like loved that everybody was like, oh, that's that kooky criminal Elroy Kent. Like he loved his reputation.
So he was just like, he's honestly kind of giving, and again, I've never seen it, but it's giving Peaky Blinders. Like it's giving like he likes that reputation.
Yeah.
But
I could see that.
you know,
They're
he's
more-
one of the outsiders.
They're
right?
definitely more violent, I would say. Well, they're more violent than him at this point.
Oh no.
But yeah, so but I would say like you're right, like the kind of like
that attitude.
He's walking around like he owns the place.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah,
The
there you go.
gall.
Red right hand is playing at all times when he's walking, and so
love,
that makes sense.
love.
So he actually said to a reporter in 1902, because they would like press would ask him and like be like, "Hey,
What's your
you
deal?"
still being kooky, Elroy?" And he was like, "I am."
I mean, really, what else happens in Vermont?
Yeah,
So-
exactly. At that point, that like nothing.
Yeah.
So he said the 2 things I love best are whiskey and railroad rides.
Let's go, baby. He's living life.
Now we're right now being like Elroy Kent. He's a kooky guy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna change.
Okay, I'm gonna.
It's gonna change, but I believe there are extenuating.
Yeah.
There it is. Extenuating factors that come into play later that I think were a little ignored.
Okay.
I also wonder if he actually committed the crime that he was convicted for.
Oh, shit.
And I wonder what you guys will think. So the paper said, poor Elroy Kent, finding enjoyment only in whiskey and railroad rides and seeing nothing before him but prison life.
Okay.
So everybody just kind of gave up on him, too. They were like, this guy's a loser and he's just going to be in prison forever.
That's sad.
Which, again, he didn't really give them much of a choice but to look at him that way.
Truth.
So the theft of the money from his cousin actually resulted in him. So he went to prison he was sentenced to the 3-year prison stint. He didn't serve the entire thing. Like I said, I don't know exactly how much he served of it, but he ended up having to go back to prison because they had given him parole for the cousin stealing thing.
And he broke it.
He broke the parole because he robbed a store in Milton while he was on parole.
He's got to stop it. Wow.
And
Milton.
actually, this was the first example of someone violating parole in Vermont's history.
Whoa, look at that.
Good old Elroy.
Yeah.
So it was actually Governor William Stickney who was the one who insisted he be sent back to prison to finish his sentence out because he said he just had a flagrant disregard for the law.
Truth.
And he did.
Yeah.
So 100% I'm on the governor's side.
Go governor.
Now, once he was released finally from Windsor again, Kent found Brattleboro authorities waiting for him with a warrant for his arrest right away because they said, hey, you violated parole after we let you out for stealing your cousin's $12, but now you have to go back to jail and finish that sentence.
Ooh.
Because they were like, we got you out, we paroled you, you broke the parole, you went back to jail for violating the parole, and now you've come out, we're going to make you finish off that sentence.
Yeah, that sucks.
It was only a few more months in Newfane at this point, but now he had to go back.
Okay.
So he just got out and they were like, ding, 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 you're going to that one now.
Goodbye.
Now, on December 6th, 1902, he actually escaped from prison.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
Honestly, I was waiting for that.
Yeah, that was the obvious next.
He has the
thing.
vibe of somebody that escapes
He
prison.
does. Now, this is where shit gets wild. And
Okay.
this is where his life changes again from being a petty criminal who we can all go, oh my goodness, that Elroy, he's so kooky, that's funny. This is when it turns.
Okay.
And this is when something happened that makes it turn, in my opinion at least.
Yeah, sure.
So he escapes from prison and he hops on a train in West Dummerston, headed away from the city. Everything's going according to plan. Everything's smooth. He's hanging out on this railroad car. He's thinking about the whiskey he's going to have. He's like, my 2 favorite things.
He's
I'm
like, so
excited. I'm
excited.
free. And then someone on the train car looks at him and recognizes him
Uh-oh.
and calls him right the fuck out.
Oh, no.
He freaks out thinking everyone else is going to hear this and everyone else is going to recognize him and he does not want to go back to prison because now he's thinking like, I'm just going to get away from here and start living my life. So he jumped from the moving train. And it was as it was approaching Williamsville Station. He jumps out and his head hit one of the railroad ties.
Oh.
And according to the Boston Daily Globe in 1902, it hit with great force.
You would think.
Now, according to reports that came out later, Elroy had sustained a skull fracture when he hit the tracks.
Holy shit.
He had a skull fracture and he lay unconscious on the tracks for several hours before he woke up. No one helped him. He just woke up and he wandered away to a nearby farmhouse. And when he got to this farmhouse, the owner of the home called the local doctor, Dr. P.P. White. And I know, I saw Ash's face.
I had to.
P.P. Now,
White.
when the doctor came, he saw that Kent not only had a skull fracture, but he was like, this man has a piece of rotten wood that was driven into his brain when he fell.
I'm sorry. What?
This man has a skull fracture from diving out of a moving train. And when that happened, somehow a piece of rotten wood had been driven into his brain. Not just his skull, his brain.
He basically had like a road pick lobotomy.
Literally.
Holy shit.
So the doctor took out as much wood as he was able to and dressed the wounds and just kind of like,
Was like, you're going to
was
die.
like, I hope you're going to survive this. And the next day, the doctor saw him again. And he was there to kind of examine the wound, make sure something was
still
happening,
alive.
and like drain everything, do what he had to do. During this whole thing, he discovers that, quote, the wood had been driven through the top of the head diagonally, through the brain to the base of the nose.
What? How is he even functioning?
A piece of wood 2 7/8 inches long and 1 inch in diameter was removed.
How is he functioning?
2 1/4 ounces of brain tissue were cut off, and a piece of gauze, just a yard square, was packed into the opening.
They put gauze into his brain?
So, as you can see, anything that happens from here on out, likely the result of some mental illness and some severe, like, cognitive issues.
I was just going to say, that's like the most traumatic brain injury I think I've ever heard of.
Which does not excuse anything that happens
Absolutely
later.
not.
But means that he should have been sent to a hospital for anything that had happened after this, and probably not executed for anything that happened after this. So this is it's just,
honestly, what's sad is if they had sent him to a hospital, it probably would have been worse.
I know, it's true. It's very true, especially back then.
You know.
Now, obviously it's impossible for us to sit here and say for sure that any of this injury that he got when he jumped out of the train affected his behavior, and like
impossible
for us to like totally sit there and say 100%.
Yeah, we're not doctors.
But like,
come on.
It seems like that would have a pretty big effect on what was going on
like,
here.
Please sit there and tell me with 2 inches of wood stuck into the middle of your fucking cranium that you'd act normal.
Feels like this is, and what we know is that by 1903, his behavior and his thinking was becoming very disordered and very unpredictable. Enough for officials at the prison where he was brought back to after this.
Oh my God, they just threw him back in prison?
Yeah, but the officials actually had him transferred to this from the state prison in Windsor to the quote unquote, this is what they called it, Hospital for the Insane in Waterbury.
Sure.
Now, that was because the officials at the prison were like,
something's wrong.
He's a different, like, this is a different beast. Like, that's got to go that way.
Was he like violent now?
I think he was becoming so disordered. He was like unpredictable. He was bizarre.
And he still, he still has rotten wood in his brain, correct?
He literally, and pieces of his brain were taken out.
Oh my God.
Like that, yeah.
Holy shit. This is really insane.
This case did bring, as you'll find out, like at the end of it, like this brought up a lot of discussion about, one, the death penalty as a whole, two, how, executing the, like what they referred to as the criminally insane back then.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like what we're going to see is like, this was kind of a circumstantial case.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it's kind of based off of stuff that it's like, you executed this guy.
Yeah.
And you didn't even really know if this is like, oh, I don't know about this one.
Oh no.
So that did bring up a lot of discussion, and it did also lead to like the death penalty in Vermont, like stopping. Like this was at least part of the discussion. It was cited many times.
Wow. Okay.
While people were fighting to get the death penalty abolished. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
No problem.
And it also gets brought up now as like a way of being like, the death penalty is barbaric. Like, look what happened here.
Wow.
So this case really did have a lot to do with that, which I guess is a positive that comes out of it, because
see, this is what I don't understand when some people don't like old-timey cases, because I'm sitting here right now like, holy shit, what?
It leads to so much.
It does.
And it's like, this was before the forensic, science boom that had happened. So it's
right.
It's interesting to see the scrappy way in which cases had to be solved, and what happened when you didn't have the tools to solve it correctly, and what comes out of that. Mm-hmm. I just think that's really interesting.
Don't worry, my case this week has a lot of forensic DNA involved.
There you go. So, we're balancing it out. I like it. Yeah. And we haven't even talked about Delia yet. We're going to get to Delia, who is the victim in this case. And it's like, she also, like, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. There's a lot of different victims here.
I was just going to say.
It's sad.
Yeah.
The whole case is very, very sad. But sometime in the evening hours because he's been transferred to the hospital now, in the evening hours of August 12th, 1905, he had spent 18 months in confinement at this point in the hospital. He escaped from the hospital, disappeared out into the night.
Oof.
The press went wild immediately.
They're probably terrified.
Pretty terrified. Again, at this point, he hasn't been outwardly violent in his crimes still.
But I'm sure people were worried.
But now they're a little worried. But what they really went after was criticizing the hospital and criticizing the state for the administrative and security failure.
Yeah, like why was he left alone?
Yeah, like what's happening here? Why was that allowed to happen? Now, according to reports, quote, in order to make his escape, this was in the Rutland Daily Herald, by the way. Or excuse me. No, it was in the St. Albans Daily Messenger. The next one is in the Herald. Excuse me. It said, in order to make his escape, he was obliged to unlock 3 doors and make his way out through an attic window, which was not barred.
Y'all.
So they were like, why was that able to happen?
We gotta fix these things.
And hospital staff just checked his cell during the morning rounds, and he just wasn't there.
And it's also like, why were there not like rounds on rounds on rounds?
Exactly. And they made note of that they saw that he had procured in some way a new suit of clothes, and his old one was found in its usual place, which is just outside the cell door.
Yikes.
So they're like, how did he even get new clothes? Like, what was going on in there?
Like, what? Do you believe that possibly he was helped? Or no?
I don't think so. I think he just was able to walk through 3 doors and up into an unbarred window and was like, bye. Because he still had some, he wasn't like, unfunctioning. Sure. At this point, like he was functioning, but his behavior and his thinking was definitely scattered and mightily different than what it was before. So once he had escaped and they had discovered that he escaped, Sheriff F.H. Tracy was sent from Montpelier to Waterbury to lead the search for him. He told reporters a basic description of Elroy. He said his height is 5 feet 4 inches, weight 160 pounds. He has hazel eyes and brown hair. He wore a light mustache when last seen, has a deep scar on the left side of his forehead. I bet he does. 2 inches long, 1.5 inch wide, and 1/2 inch deep at lower end. He also has scars on the back, remember from being shot with a buckshot. And 6 shot scars on the left leg, or on the right leg, excuse me.
6?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he was shot in the leg 6 times?
Or it's a buckshot. So it's like, I think those are the ones, and I should probably look it up before I say this, but I'll look it up. I believe those are the ones that it like several pieces shoot out. Like it explodes a little bit.
Oof. I'm
going to look it up.
Absolutely terrible.
It does sound pretty terrible.
Ooh. I keep feeling that in my yeg.
I think yes. So it's a big shock. It's like shotgun shells for hunting game, I guess, or buckshot. And basically it says the most commonly produced buckshot shell is a 12 gauge, which we've heard of.
Yep.
And they hold 8 pellets inside of them. So when they hit, it's like the pellets explode. Like it's one of those things. Or when they shoot it, the pellets explode, I think.
Yeah, schematics.
I'm not completely familiar with all that, but I believe that's like a very rudimentary way of saying it.
Oh, I like that word, rudimentary.
But basically when you shoot someone with a buckshot, they're gonna have several scars.
They're gonna get fucked up.
Yeah, it's not gonna be great. So they explained his description, but unfortunately, investigators lost his trail pretty quickly, and he didn't really come back into their focus until like 2 months later.
Oh, shit.
That's when his brother, Llewellyn, I think it's called. Llewellyn, it's called. I said it's pronounced is what I meant. His brother Llewellyn reported that Elroy had attacked him. Reported it to a police. Now, according to news reports, on the morning of September 29th, both of them, the 2 brothers, apparently Elroy had been home. They had been transported a load of potatoes to the market in nearby Rockingham and had returned with supplies and some provisions like flour, sugar, and apparently liquid fire.
What is liquid fire?
I looked this up and gas? I cannot find an actual response. I think it could mean many things. It could be like oil of some kind, like I think it's something like that, but they called it liquid fire, which sounds like wildfire from like Game of Thrones. Like I feel like it's like this green glowy liquid that they have, and I'm like, why do you have that?
For real. It just makes me think of Baked Alaska.
There you go, liquid fire.
I don't know.
No, later that evening, I guess Llewellyn's young son George said he heard shouts and groans outside the house, so he went out there to investigate what was going on. And according to him, he said about, quote, 40 rods from his house, which thanks to Dave, I now know is 220 yards.
Why does Dave
40
know that?
rods. Dave knows all.
He does. It's true.
Apparently, George Kent, the son, found the family wagon overturned, and he saw a large pool of blood next to it.
Oh, no.
So a little bit further away, he found his father lying beside a creek with his nose broken, a large gash in the back of his neck, and his face and head badly cut.
Oh, no. That's very violent.
Yeah. Now, once he'd regained consciousness, Llewellyn told police that he and Elroy had been out on the road. They got into an argument, and the argument scared the horses, so the horses ran off. Mm-hmm. When this happened, the wagon overturned. According to Llewellyn, the wagon flipped with him underneath it.
Oof.
Now, when that happened, the force of that drove an iron bar into his neck.
Dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, and when he asked Elroy, he was like freaking out, asking Elroy to pull the metal bar out of his neck.
Can we stop with the impalement of everyone?
He said that Elroy, quote, tried to drive it in still farther. And then he said he lost consciousness and couldn't remember anything after that. What? But when he came to later, he said Elroy was gone and he had taken Llewellyn's wallet.
That's your brother, dude.
So after all this petty theft, generally non-violent crimes, everything is turned now.
We're getting
because
violent.
If his brother was to be believed, Elroy didn't just attack his brother and steal his wallet. He had tried to kill him.
And it kind of seems like maybe he thought he was dead when
I think
he
he probably did. Now, luckily, Elroy was arrested about 3 weeks later in Haddam, Connecticut. A local constable actually spotted him crossing a railroad bridge and just recognized who he was.
Just Elroy still walking out across railroad bridges.
Elroy still just doing whatever the hell he wants to do.
I would never, ever approach another railroad ever again.
No, he loves railroads.
He does, but like
even
look what
after
happened.
that, the love is deep.
You can take the boy from the railroad, but you
can't-
literally cannot take the railroad from the boy.
But it's still in his head.
Accurate.
So the constable questioned him, and during the course of the questioning, he determined that Elroy was definitely responsible for a burglary that had also occurred the day before in town.
Oh, another one?
Yeah. Confirmation of this came quickly when he searched his pockets and discovered all the stolen shit from the house.
Oh my God, Elroy.
So he was confirmed to be Elroy Kent, and the constable contacted Sheriff Tracy, who traveled to Connecticut and brought him back to Vermont.
My goodness.
So Elroy said that he had managed to escape the hospital by picking the locks with a piece of metal from his shoe and a length of wire.
The fuck?
So he said once he was outside, he had just climbed down the wall wearing only a shirt, and then he swam down the Winooski River until he felt like he was far enough away, and he just got away.
This man has lived a life, and he's probably like 25 at this point.
Truly. Now, the next day, he said he stole a new suit of clothes, and then he made his way to his brother's house in Townsend.
Hey, broy.
When asked about the assault on his brother, Kent said he was like, but he was
alive?
like, I don't really have any explanation for that. Yikes. So he was returned to the hospital in Waterbury pretty quickly.
Okay.
Now, once he was brought back to Vermont by the sheriff, he spent several more years in the hospital in Waterbury. And that wasn't until the early, I don't know why I can't say until. That was until.
Yeah.
I haven't had enough coffee, and it's tiramisu coffee. It's making me excited, so I can't speak.
Do more coffee.
Do more coffee.
It is a drug.
I will do more.
Do your coffee, ready?
I'm gonna do my coffee.
Oh my God, guys, she's doing coffee right now. Whoa.
I just did some coffee. Okay. So that's really yummy. Now,
Dead sled tiramisu.
Yeah. This was until the early morning hours. See, that worked.
Check it.
Of July 11th, 1908, when he and a fellow inmate named John Keenan escaped again.
They need to close this hospital right the fuck down. If the same guy, you would think that you'd be keeping even more tabs on him.
A little bit.
Like tabs on him anyways, but even more so now.
Because he's escaped once.
Y'all.
Yeah, he's escaped again. This was years later.
He's escaped again, and he even told you how he did it the first time. And you're not checking this out.
Oh, and this is even worse. He escaped using a duplicate key that was given to them by another inmate who tried to escape the previous week.
What?
It was like, here's my duplicate key. You can use it.
How did you get, what?
Yeah, they created
a 3D printer out there in those streets?
In 1908, they created a ladder using pieces of Keenan's bed sheets and used it to climb over the wall surrounding the hospital.
Elroy's like, right this way.
Just this way. Hospital administrators said they were confident that both men would be recaptured within a few days. Confidence is a nice thing to have.
Yeah, especially at that point.
It's a nice thing to have.
I think that's all you have at this point.
It's really all you got because that confidence was pretty unfounded.
You fucking idiots.
Now let's talk about Delia Congdon.
Yeah.
So Delia had a lot of struggle in her life as well, but seemed like she was kind of thriving out of it, which is really cool. She was
sad though.
Yeah, she was born into one of Wallingford, Vermont's founding families.
Oh wow.
But she contracted scarlet fever at age 8. Back then, scarlet fever is
crazy that
really
she
bad.
lived.
And this rendered her completely deaf at age 8.
Oh wow.
So until then, she had been able to hear, and it was just boop, happened all at once.
Terrible.
And it also affected her speech to such a degree that it was difficult for people to understand what she was saying. So she would get frustrated and it was tough.
Yeah.
Now, several family members also said that Delia had actually been born with a cognitive impairment.
Okay.
And scarlet fever kind of exacerbated that whole thing. Exacerbated, excuse me.
It's hard to say.
By the time she had become an adult, Delia's parents and several of her siblings had actually died from various illnesses, and her remaining siblings had just moved away.
They just left her?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know what the whole story was, but it made me sad too.
Yeah.
But she made the best of it though, because of all this, she inherited the family home, which was this large farm on Sugar Hill. She's doing the hill, yeah.
She said, "I got this house,"
and she had a little bit of a reputation that people called her a spinster. She was only 40, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
She's 40, but in reality, Delia was never alone, and she was never lonely. She mostly was surrounded by friends. Her neighbors were all surrounding her at all times.
Hell yeah.
They all took care of her.
Looked out for her.
Looked out for her greatly. And they didn't look out for her in a way that made her feel like they were pitying her.
We have to look out for you.
People genuinely liked her and spent time with her a lot. She always had friends over. She was thriving. She was
that.
you know what? I'm a cool person, and everybody knows that.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Also, she had local school children at her farm all the time because she would bake them cookies regularly.
Oh my God, shut your fucking face.
She's just this nice person that's I was dealt a tough set of cards, but
but here I am working
but fuck
with
it. Everybody likes me and I'm awesome.
Yeah,
and,
I
I'm
love
gonna
that.
be kind and just live my life.
Oh, she sounds really cool.
Yeah. So on the morning of July 23rd, 1908, 2 of Delia's neighbors, named the Sprague brothers, they were working in the field next to the Congdon house because she allowed them to farm on her land because they were so close, all of her and her neighbors.
And that's a huge deal back then. You don't
Big
just
deal.
give up your land for farming.
Yeah. So while they're working, they said they were approached by a small man who said he was looking for work.
5'4".
5'4", exactly. According to the Sprague brothers, they said the man noticed Delia in her yard. And they saw that he noticed this. And he said, "Who's that woman?" And they were like, "Why do you need to know that?"
Yeah, who's asking?
And then they said he, quote, proceeded to say what sort of things he would like to do to her.
Oh, I don't like that.
So horrified by these
Jesus.
statements, I guess the brothers looked at him and said they would, quote, shoot full of holes anyone who tried such a thing.
Fuck yeah.
And they said, you better move along and you better seek work somewhere else.
Yeah,
because you're not getting any
finding it
work
here.
over here.
Good.
Not after saying that, which I was like, fuck yeah.
They said, we will make you Swiss cheese.
Yeah, these men are
they're brothers.
don't you dare fuck with Delia.
Hell yeah.
She's our girl.
I love community.
Now, the next day, Delia didn't get the bottle of milk that was left on her front porch by the milkman. Neighbors, of course, noticed this immediately because, like I said, they all love her. They're looking out for her. So they went right to her home to knock on the door and see if she was okay.
And I'm sure even more so those 2 brothers now.
Yeah, of course. So when they entered the home, they found Delia lying dead on the pantry floor.
No.
They said, quote, in a condition which indicated she had been ravished and with several deep cuts upon the head.
Oh, no.
Now, a large amount of blood was coming from her head. It had pooled next to her. There was blood spattered on the walls in the pantry. Sheriff E.C. Fish was immediately called out to the scene. He started talking to anyone who was on the farm, around the farm, all the neighbors. After a pretty quick investigation of the scene, he actually arrested a man named Frank Rogers, who was an occasional farmhand and was known as a pretty tough character. That's a quote, tough character.
Sure.
Rogers had actually served 3 sentences at the House of Correction.
Damn.
And people said they saw him on the property the previous evening.
Okay.
So that's why he was taken in. So they did a little examination of the scene, and they determined that Delia had been probably preparing breakfast for herself in the pantry.
Oh my God.
When whoever had killed her had approached her from behind and struck her on the head several times with a wood-splitting axe.
How senseless.
Yeah. Now, according to state's attorney Robert Lawrence, when she was discovered, Delia, quote, was fully dressed and had a toothbrush in her hand, which had been broken in two.
Oh my God.
Her false teeth were in an adjoining room, and it appears as if she retreated into the pantry when attacked. Now,
That's so sad.
the killer had then taken the handle of the axe and wrapped it with fabric and like with her clothing fabric, and had twisted the fabric around her neck and then used the axe as a garrote.
Oh my God.
And had literally garroted her with the axe and her own clothing.
After
Brutalizing her, after sexually assaulting her,
Oh, no.
which they found definitely happened,
Oh, no.
and beating her in the head with the axe. They then garroted her.
Oh my God, and she was just making
Yeah.
breakfast.
Just making breakfast, just woke up.
Oh my God.
The body also showed signs of bruising and what they referred to as criminal assault, indicating that she was very likely raped. Lawrence, the state's attorney, he also told reporters she had evidently put up a fierce fight for her life. But, and this is his words, not mine. Remember, we're in 1900s here. But as she had been deaf and dumb from an early age, it was impossible for her to cry out. Obviously, cognitive impairment was treated and discussed rather differently back then, so we would never say deaf and dumb.
No.
Like, what? But
the fact that anybody ever thought that was
well,
okay.
that's it's like why was dumb the word for cognitive impairment from birth? Like,
Right.
come on.
Like, no.
And it's like all you have to say is like because she couldn't hear.
Yeah.
She couldn't hear them coming, and because she like you don't have to say like she was just unable to cry out.
Right.
You know? Like we know who Delia is. Like people in the area know her.
Just put it simply.
Like you don't need to make it sound like that, but it's like, you know,
It's disrespectful.
stupid times, basically. Stupid times, stupid statements. But it's important to say them because that's the time period, and it's
that's
important
what was
to
said,
look
yeah.
at it and go, my, how far we have come. But
Sort of.
what he was saying was she put up a fierce fight.
Yeah.
But that she was unable to cry out. She couldn't get the words out. She obviously probably didn't hear the person coming up behind her when they attacked her.
And she's already been struck in the head like immediately. So
Quickly.
maybe she couldn't at that point even yell out.
To incapacitate her.
Right.
And she's in her own fucking house. Like she's in her own house making breakfast.
Yeah.
Like what the hell? So after killing Delia, the killer then went through all the drawers, went through all her stuff. And the problem here was that she lived alone, so nobody could say whether anything had been stolen or not.
Right. They didn't know exactly what she
nobody
had.
didn't know. So based on this, they did conclude that the motive was likely robbery because of the ransacking. But again, with no evidence that something is stolen, that can be staged.
Yeah.
And to me, it looks like she was raped and brutally murdered. That looks like the motive.
That's what I was going to say is like the rape and
Yeah.
the murder of the doll.
And the way he said it was evidence was found to indicate robbery as the motive, some of the furniture being ransacked and drawers being found open and the contents of the drawers thrown about. Which I'm like, that to me sounds staged.
Definitely.
The content of the drawers
Just
thrown about.
Yeah.
So the evidence against Frank Rogers, the sometimes farmhand, was not great.
Okay.
Flimsy and circumstantial might be a better way to put it.
Okay.
He'd been seen in the vicinity the night before.
There's that.
Couldn't easily account for like all his movements in the days leading up to the murder. But it was really just them going, well, you have a reputation for like being a criminal and being violent sometimes. So like, it's probably you.
Yikes.
Like that's about it. That's
Yeah.
really all they had.
Right.
It was only after examining his body and the clothes he was seen wearing that day on the day of the murder that he was actually released because
He had
there was
nothing.
no evidence of blood. There was no evidence of a fight. He had
No
no
scratch.
scratches, no bruise. There was no blood on his clothes.
And there would be.
And that it would have been next to impossible to achieve coming out of that with no wounds, defensive wounds, no blood on your clothing. And he would have been covered.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 days later, on July 27th, was the autopsy of Delia Congdon. And this was to determine the cause of death and hopefully the order of events that had happened. So doctors B.H. Stone and William Stickney reported that Delia had been attacked in her home by the assailant who sexually assaulted her first in the main home of the house. Then she had run She had fled into the pantry to hide.
Oh my God.
But her attacker had followed her and struck her on the head 6 times with the wood-splitting axe.
God, this is heartbreaking.
Which caused 6 cuts to her scalp. But the doctors determined the cause of death was actually strangulation caused by the handle of the axe having been wrapped in her shirt and garroting her.
This is horrific.
Yeah. So also, what's like a really strange thing here is that, and this also worked in Frank Rogers' favor of them being like, it's probably not him.
Yeah.
Was they found something in the barn on the Congdon property.
Okay.
Carved into the wall.
Oh, I don't like this.
Next to a pile of hay that was clearly recently disturbed. Were the initials EK.
And you don't know if he did this or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
You said, wait, there's more.
Here's the thing. I'm not saying he didn't do this. I'm saying
it
is really circumstantial evidence.
Oh, okay.
My gut tells me he probably did.
Oh, okay. I see.
But I don't think they had enough to convict him on.
Oh, okay. I see.
And I don't think they had enough to execute him on for sure.
Gotcha.
Now police.
I was like,
you're like, excuse me.
I was like, I have misunderstood.
I think he definitely was sleeping in that barn for sure.
Yeah.
But that doesn't say that he
murdered her. Okay.
Now, police had no luck tracking Elroy Kent. So, like, they found those things, and they haven't been able to find him. And that was since he escaped the hospital 2 weeks before this.
For the second time.
Yeah, but several people in the area said they had seen him at least in the area of the Congdon farm a week earlier.
I bet they did.
So, residents of East Wallingford believed he was kind of harmless because up until this point, they didn't know, they didn't know what the brother thing was. Like, they were kind of, so in their words, they called him, quote, a half-witted tramp who had drifted in.
Jesus Christ. They really knew how to insult people back then.
I'm saying.
A half-witted tramp?
A half-witted tramp.
I know what I'm calling the next person that crosses me.
Yeah, there you go.
You're a half-witted tramp.
But they figured he just drifted in to find work. And so they were like, when they saw him out and about, they were kind of just like, yeah, I guess he's supposed to be in a hospital, but like,
we can't keep
really
him there.
Big problem. Which I'm like, did anyone know what he did to his brother?
It doesn't sound like it.
Did you all? That didn't come out.
Apparently, it was not widely reported.
Apparently not. And Elroy Kent, he definitely matched the description of the man the Sprague brothers described seeing the day before Delia's murder.
And like you said, he's looking for work.
So that's why, to me, most of me believes he did this for sure. I think when it comes to the execution is where my problem lies.
Sure, yeah.
Is like there were other things happening here that I think he should have just been
put back in the hospital. But do you think maybe, and we'll talk about, I'll ask that question later.
We'll talk about it. Now, investigators searched like abandoned buildings and other areas that they said they knew that like people who drifted in and out would kind of hang out and use, like unused buildings. And there was one on an unused outbuilding on a nearby farm that they looked at. And they found an area of, disturbed hay, kind of like in the barn. And they said it looked like it had been used as a bed. And on the wall near it was carved E. Kent.
Oh, another one.
Another one.
Okay. Another one.
Another one. Now, this is why it's like, so he did it here, he did it there. It's clear he's sleeping in these places and then leaving his initial on the side.
Yeah. Which also, I'm like, why are you leaving your initials?
Yeah, that's the thing. Now, the carving matched that of the one found in Delia Congdon's barn. And investigators were like, okay, so Kent had definitely slept in her barn the night before the murder. That barn we can see is connected to this next one. We can trace his movements that way. But they also noted that from the barn, he could probably see into Delia's bedroom and would have been able to track her movements the next morning from that barn.
Freaky.
So they theorized he probably watched. He waited for her to unlock the door to the house. And when she did, he snuck in and attacked her and then tore the house apart to search for any money or anything valuable.
And we have like the account from the two brothers of him explicitly saying what he wanted to do to her.
Exactly.
And then she was raped.
And that's the part that really stuck in my mind is like, But
again, it's based off of somebody saying something and we never heard the conversation.
That's the other thing. So this is a matter of like, do I think he did it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do I think they had enough to convict him and execute him? Probably not.
Yeah.
But this was a different time.
You didn't need as much.
Yeah, exactly. Now, This was definitely not the first time that he had been leading the police on like a wild goose chase at this point. But this time was a little different because they're not dealing with the petty criminal Elroy Kent. They're dealing with a man who has clearly demonstrated that he does have a capacity for violence. What he did to his brother was wild.
Horrific.
He also kind of has everything to lose if he's captured at this point, which is not good. So the search for Kent began immediately around the area once they found those carvings, and it was around the areas of Wallingford, Rutland, and Brattleboro. So for some extra power and some extra help, Sheriff Fish gathered deputies from the area who had known or dealt with Kent in the past, so from outside areas. And they thought maybe they would have like unique insight into who he is, like his character, so they could kind of determine where he might be.
Okay.
And the sheriff's office also got some bloodhounds in.
Oh, shit.
And they tracked Kent's trail from the Congdon farm to a spot in the mountains near his sister's home in Wallingford.
Ooh.
But they got, the dogs got super exhausted. It was a long way.
I mean, it's
and
a
they
mountain.
they needed to rest.
Yeah.
And they couldn't even start the search again till the next day. So they began again the next day, August 1st, and the dogs lost his trail.
Oh, shit.
Handlers tried to get them back on track. They gave him a pair of his old shoes that he wore at the hospital. And they were able to track him again briefly, but they were only able to track him as far as an abandoned building on his sister's property.
How fucking cool
Right?
is like
that
kind of
bloodhounds?
work? Fucking wild.
That is a whole a whole subject that I could just sit there and read about forever. It's fascinating to me.
I really do think that would actually make a very cool episode.
That'd be cool, like how it came about, how they are trained. Like that's just really cool.
I mean, because you could go back to like way long ago they've been using bloodhounds.
Like bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, all that stuff. Like dogs are wild.
Even like in royal times when they would go hunting. It is interesting. I think you would do a really good job at that too.
That would be a fun one.
I would like that one.
Put it in the little bucket.
Jar of ideas.
There you go. Jar sounds better than bucket. So we'll go with that.
It's not a bucket, it's a jar.
But they did try. They gave him the shoes worn at the hospital. They only got to that abandoned building on the sister's property in East Dorset, and then they lost the trail again.
I've never heard of Dorset.
Now, luckily, investigators received a tip that afternoon. Apparently, some berry pickers were the ones who gave this tip. They were working at a nearby farm, and they said a man wearing a bloody shirt and pretty much, according to them, matching Kent's description, had been discovered in some bushes on the property and was scared away before anybody could call the police. The dogs managed to pick up a scent where they said, and they followed it for nearly 10 miles down the highway, and then they lost it again.
Damn it.
And according to the owners of the dogs, really the only reason they would lose the trail was if the scent was too old.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of led investigators to think that Kent was definitely no longer in the area. He had long gone.
Yep.
Now, the dogs losing the trail definitely sucked. But a week later, they became kind of hopeful because a new clue and a pattern was starting to emerge. Wherever Kent was, he just couldn't help but leave his initials somewhere. Anywhere he stayed overnight, he would leave his initials carved into it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's wild. It began like emerging in different locations around southern Vermont. He would do it on trees.
Are there
abandoned
any
buildings
that still exist that you know of?
I don't know. That's a good question. We should look it up because I wonder if there are. I'm sure a lot of these buildings are probably gone, but they said on trees and stuff too. And in one case, this is pretty wild. Ooh. 3 boys passing by Red Mill Pond in Woodford on August 8th, they stopped at a local barn and they carved their initials into the side of the barn because remember, it's like 1908. What else are you going to do?
Right.
And they returned the next day and they saw that next to their initials, someone had carved EK.
Ooh, creepy.
So it's like he saw those initials and I was like, I was here too.
Yeah, right. Creepy.
Now, Kent's family was still in the region, so investigators were thinking he might be making his way through the mountains in the direction of Massachusetts.
Hey.
But they had no idea where he was going to show up next. Now, as weeks went by and investigators were failing to bring this guy in, couldn't find him anywhere, the news started focusing more on them and their failures and less on the murderer on the loose. Mm-hmm. Among other things, the articles were saying that the Wallingford Deputy Sheriff Alan Leonard and A.C. Mason, who were in charge of the hunt for Kent, had been spotted drinking on the job. And when they were refused further alcohol, They produced bottles from their jackets, so like they had brought their own liquor.
BYOB, baby.
Now, in late August, attorneys for Leonard and Mason filed a lawsuit against Olin French, who was the publisher of the Vermont Phoenix, and they sued him for $5,000 each.
Damn, and back then, holy
That's
shit.
a lot. And the basis of the lawsuit was the Vermont Phoenix had published articles that, quote, falsely, wickedly, and maliciously injured the officers by claiming they, quote, appeared to be as much a menace to the peace and good order as Elroy Kent.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so that's just a little like, woof.
Yeah.
Some drama. Now, while the lead investigators are just trying to fight with the press now over their reputation, sheriff's deputies were just trying to continue the search and trying to make this happen.
You know, the main focus.
The job. Then they finally caught a break in late October. It was then that a man matching Kent's description was arrested in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Hey.
He was trying to sell a stolen bicycle.
Believe it. I bet it was Elroy.
Right. So he was arrested, and the man said his name was William Allen. And he said, I've never heard of Elroy Kent. I don't know what you're talking about. Several hours of questioning later, he said, you know what? I'm Elroy Kent.
Well, shit. Here I am.
He said he escaped from the hospital in Waterbury, and he vehemently denied having anything to do with Delia Congdon's murder.
Then why did
He
you
was
lie
like,
about
sure,
your
I
name?"
escaped for sure, and I just didn't want to be caught and put back in the hospital, but I did not murder that woman.
Okay.
Now, in order to be sure it was the man that they were looking for, State's Attorney Robert Lawrence was sent to Pittsfield to identify him and bring him back, and he definitely was Elroy Kent.
Yeah, I figured.
So on the morning of October 26th, he was brought to Rutland County in the company of deputies Leonard and Wilkins. He admitted to being a fugitive from justice. He was like, for sure, I've been outrunning you because I didn't want to go back in the hospital. But he continued to deny anything to do with Delia Congdon's murder. And he said he wasn't even in the vicinity of East Wallingford at the time of the murder.
Wow.
When they reached the train station in Rutland, I guess like more than 200 people had shown up just to see him be put on the
shit.
train. And I guess he was quoted as saying, I didn't know there were so many fools in all the world. I'm like, damn.
That's funny.
You're saucy.
I don't want to laugh at him, though.
No, because you just don't know. I feel like he did it. So it's
Yeah.
like, and no matter what, he was a shithead from before the head trauma. So it's like he was a bad guy.
And he hurt his brother.
He did, and he hurt his brother like
don't do
really
that.
bad.
Yeah, like could have killed him.
Like hurt his brother and robbed him and robbed his own cousin.
Like I would
So it's
low-key call that attempted murder.
Oh, that was one. They called it attempted murder.
there you
That's
go,
what they
yeah.
looked at it as. That he walked away probably thinking he had killed him.
Yeah.
Now,
Not good.
So Elroy Kent had already been indicted by a grand jury for the murder of Delia Congdon.
Yes.
So he pled not guilty and was held in a cell to await trial. The trial began March 30th, 1909, and State's Attorney J.C. Jones, John Sargent, and Robert Lawrence announced that they intended to call more than 30 witnesses to the stand.
Shit.
What's funny is that most of them, apparently, all the witnesses, apparently, quote, complained of being kept away from their farms at sugar making time.
I mean,
They were annoyed.
hello, priorities.
Priorities, I mean, especially at that time, it's like, this is a big fucking deal.
Well, no,
I'm
I'm sure-
away at a serious time here.
And I think sugar was expensive back then, right?
Yeah, so it's probably like, you're really taking money out of my pocket here.
Yeah.
The trial was a bit over 2 weeks long, and throughout it, the prosecution called several witnesses, like the Sprague brothers were called to the stand.
All the sugar
and
farmers.
All the sugar farmers, and they claimed to have seen Kent in the area just before the murder. And the motive that they were putting out there was robbery.
Wrong.
Yeah, I don't think that was the full motive.
I think it was rape.
Because remember, I think even before the head injury, he seemed to like just doing the act of robbery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think he liked it, and I think he escalated into needing more to like what he was doing.
Yeah.
But the prosecution introduced several pieces of evidence. They had Delia Congdon's bloody clothing. They had section of wood bearing Kent's carved initials that they had taken out of various places.
Where is it now?
Where is it?
I couldn't find. I just tried to look while you were saying.
Because I feel like there's got to be a tree somewhere
think
with his
so.
initials on it.
Well, and you would think like some random museum in Vermont would have it.
Would have them, you know?
just
like,
be interesting to see from all those years ago.
yeah,
you
because
know?
it's so long ago.
Right. And just such a freaky, weird thing
It's
to
such
do.
a weird thing that he did that.
Yeah.
That's why it's just really interesting. Dr. B.H. Stone, who was one of the men who completed Delia's autopsy, also testified and said that Delia, quote, was subject to the most outrageous treatment before she was killed. Herbert Savary, a former inmate, testified, and he claimed to have overheard Kent confess that he killed Delia, so, quote, she couldn't tell. We know how that goes
I was just
sometimes
gonna
when
say.
you listen to like former inmates or like present inmates.
It stinks because like you want to, and
Well,
it
that's-
could help testimony
There's
and
some
be
of the
true.
best line of information here, and it's like sometimes it works out, but
Right.
it's really like a 50-50 shot if it's going to work
Because
out.
at the same time, then there's some of the worst because they're just trying to get out.
Yeah, they have something to gain.
Right.
But the most crucial testimony definitely came from Deputy Leonard. He claimed that Kent had practically made a full confession to him following the arrest.
Oh, shit.
He said, quote, Kent told me that Miss Congdon saw him before he reached her and that he grabbed her and threw her into the milk room.
Oh.
Now, Leonard's testimony was corroborated the following day by Dr. W.W. Townsend, who was the physician at the House of Corrections. That was where Kent was staying, and he said he had also discussed the murder with Kent. And according to Dr. Townsend, Kent knew very specific and intimate details of the crime and had even corrected the doctor at one point.
Oof.
The doctor asked something about the crime happening in the kitchen, and he said, no, it happened in the milk room.
Oh.
Yeah. So the final bit of damning testimony came from Elgin Taggart, who was an employee of the East Wallingford cheese factory.
Oh, the cheese tax, the cheese tax.
That's a great song.
Anytime you hear cheese, you have to sing it.
Anytime. So Taggart told the jury he had spoken to Kent just before the murder, and it was when Elroy saw Delia and made, quote, an obscene remark about her. Like the Sprague brothers, Taggart had told Kent that, quote, he had better keep away from that house.
Hell yeah.
I love that our neighbors protected her.
I love that our neighbors protected her too. And the shitty thing here is that we're dealing with like sinister people. I feel like it almost made it more exciting for him.
I know, because they were
If
like,
he
we'll
is the
get
one
ya.
that
Yeah.
did it, that he was
It's
like,
true.
oh, it's even more forbidden.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the evidence and testimony against Elroy Kent was unfortunately still pretty circumstantial.
Like you were saying.
You know, like that's just the reality of it. But there was a lot of it.
Yeah.
And each piece seemed to kind of corroborate the one
next.
before it. You know, so rather than try to disprove the state's claim, Kent's defense attorneys knew that, you know, circumstantial evidence can still be pretty compelling.
Yeah, definitely.
And Ernest O'Brien and John Spellman, his defense attorneys, decided to take like a pretty broad approach to the defense. They said Elroy was nowhere near the house at the time of the murder. That was the first one. And they said even if he was, he is profoundly mentally ill and could not be held accountable for what he's done.
Okay.
At least not held accountable in the sense that he is not sane.
Right. And held accountable in the sense that he's going to go to prison for
Exactly.
this or be executed.
Like he's going to have to, like we're going to have to do an insanity defense.
And
here.
he needs like psychiatric treatment.
Yeah. So as an alternative, they also suggested that Taggart, the guy who said that he had the cheese factory guy,
Yeah.
he could have been responsible for the murder.
Okay.
They claim that by his own admission, he knew Congdon and was aware of where she lived and that she lived alone. They also said that he was a known heavy drinker and had actually been fired from the cheese factory due to his drinking interfering with his work.
Oof.
And they pointed out to the jury that when Taggart was called to the hospital in Waterbury following Kent's arrest, he could not pick Kent out of a lineup. And he couldn't in any way recognize him as the man who'd shown up at the cheese factory before the murder.
Well, that's interesting.
And Taggart's response to this was that he had, quote, made the apparent error purposely to fool Dr. Grout, the superintendent.
Why would you want to fool them?
Why he would want to do that, unclear to this day.
That's
Still don't know why he would want to do that.
yeah.
So it didn't look good for him either. It was like,
Survey says no.
Survey says, I don't fucking know about that.
Survey says the fuck.
The fuck? Now, to kind of bolster their insanity claim, the defense called a bunch of witnesses to the stand to testify about Kent's like bizarre and unpredictable behavior and his thinking, as well as disordered thinking, and the handful of years leading up to the murder. L.D. Wright, who was a nurse from the hospital, testified and told the court that he had been forced to restrain Kent with a, quote, leather jacket on occasions where he had become very violent.
That's so sad.
And he said he had also heard Kent curse, apparently at an imaginary woman.
Oh.
Dr. Grout, the superintendent, agreed while testifying that Kent was, quote, of unsound mind.
Yeah, obviously.
So they're all like, we are in the hospital, we know.
And did anybody, like, I'm like, did you guys tell them that he had fucking railroad spikes in his head?
Yeah, that's it. I'm like, was that introduced into any of it?
You would think, I mean, if you told me that and I was on the jury, I'd be like, yeah, I think we should send him back to the hospital.
Yeah, I think so. Now, on April 8th, the defense rested their case, and the prosecution had an opportunity to call one final rebuttal witness, just to kind of testify, a witness to those testifying as to Kent's sanity, basically. The witness was Dr. D.A. Shiras. He was a psychologist from Montreal. Now, this guy told the jury, in his opinion, Kent, quote, was not insane, but had been faking the delusions, which he appeared to have. He said he did not react to any questions like a man who had hallucinations. And he said, I don't believe that he is insane.
Okay.
But I would like to repeat, are we taking into account the wild head injury that he sustained years earlier?
Because it's crazier to me that he would not be like what they would have said back then, insane.
Yeah.
After having had that accident. To me, there's no way in hell that he didn't have any kind of repercussion from that.
This to me would be like a slam dunk for the insanity defense.
Yeah.
Like, they're clear, like, nobody's saying it's right what he did or it's justified in any way or like excused. But that's a defense. Like, this happened because clearly seems to fit here. At the very least, we have to take it into account.
Right. But I do guess it complicates things that he did have a long history of crime.
That's the thing. That's why this is such a complicated case.
It's a tough case, yeah.
It's very complicated because you can see both sides of that. Either way, if he did it, he's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But execution, I don't know about that.
And this is the question I was going to ask earlier, because obviously we know he's ultimately executed. Do you think they thought to themselves, whoever, made the final decision?
That's what I'm thinking.
I think I probably am. We keep sending him back to the hospital. He keeps escaping. Whether or not he did this crime, are we, quote unquote, getting rid of a problem that we have here?
I think you hit the nail on the head.
I think so too.
I think that's really what happened here is like he's been a problem.
So
let's just eradicate the problem kind of thing. And this is a perfect excuse. Again, I don't think the excuse was let's frame him for this murder. I think he probably committed the murder.
Yeah, so he was a pretty good suspect.
Something. And I think they just looked at it as like, well, he did this. So this is a way to get rid of the problem.
I think so too.
But the jury only deliberated for less than a day, only a few hours. They came back to the courtroom on April 10th and they delivered a verdict of guilty.
Yeah.
His sentencing was going to be put off until the fall. That's when he could appeal, and everyone pretty much assumed he was going to get the death penalty. And as he was being led out of the courtroom by the deputies, he was heard saying, I don't care a damn anyway.
Wow.
So it's like, sad. I don't know if it's, I don't care what I did or I don't care what happens to me. Either way. Now, in October 1909, the Vermont State Supreme Court came together to hear the cases in their fall session. Elroy Kent was in this caseload. And the defense argued that the state's strongest evidence against Kent was those initials carved in the barn.
Right.
That was really like the number one thing. And they said that was not the same as handwriting samples, and it couldn't be treated or analyzed like that. Mm-hmm. And the court considered the case as a whole. They considered everything. And then they came down and said, nope, the original sentence is going to stay. In their decision, the justices wrote, it will be noticed that this is not strictly a comparison of handwriting. It is rather the proof of a habit regarding the use of a character which, as ordinarily made, and as made in this case, affords no opportunity for the development of individual characteristics capable of detection. If a writer invariably makes the same mistake or always adopts the same two or more legitimate methods, which present substantial differences, his practice therein is a circumstance which makes his genuine writings available to establish the authenticity of a disputed one. But the respondent's connection with the carving in the Congdon barn does not depend entirely upon the similarity of letters. The evidence of the respondent's admission that he passed the night of the 23rd in this barn, the evidence tending to show a practice of cutting his initials as a pastime, the evidence that the hay was thrown upon the barn floor on the 22nd and that fresh whittlings were found on this hay just below the carving, they're evidence tending to show that the respondent made the letters. So that's a fancy way to say he said he did it.
Yup.
So
I think he did it.
Denied.
Yeah.
Like that's essentially what he did it. So
bye.
So they rejected his appeal. And the court sentenced Kent, quote, to be hanged in the yard of the state prison at Windsor on January 13th, 1911, between the hour of 1 and 3 p.m.
Wow.
The court also ordered that Kent be, quote, employed at hard labor in the state prison until October 13th, 1910. After that, he was going to be held in solitary confinement until the day of his execution.
Oh, wow. That is so fucked up.
Yeah. Kent's response to this was, I am not guilty. So in mid-December 1910, the Vermont legislature actually broke for their holiday recess, and they made a boo-boo because they didn't complete all of their end-of-year business. And when they didn't do this, they unintentionally granted Kent a brief reprieve. State laws stipulated that the legislature must issue a formal warrant before anyone can be executed, which they did not do before they went out for recess. And luckily, the problem was fixed, and a new execution date had to be set, though, for January 5th, 1912. So they granted him like a year reprieve, unintentionally.
But was he still in solitary at that point?
He was going to be in solitary for that.
For a year?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Now, after that
is like inhumane.
That's the thing. It's like this really got like
This is a sad case.
Now, all of this, and he's going to be executed, and the execution did not go off without a hitch.
No.
When the day finally came, he was taken from his cell in solitary confinement and led out to the yard. By 1:18 p.m., everything was done and prepared to go. Kent was standing over the trapdoor on the gallows. He had a noose around his neck. This was going to be the first execution in the state of Vermont to employ an electrical trapdoor. This electrical trapdoor was controlled by one of 6 switches. Now, this new system required 6 men to each push one of the buttons.
Wow.
They did this so that none of them would ever know which button caused the door to open. It's almost like a firing squad, like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. When the warden gave the signal, all 6 men pushed the button. The door dropped out from beneath Kent as planned, but when the rope pulled taut, it snapped immediately and he fell to the ground. So they had no other option. The rope was then tied over the gallows and Kent's body was hoisted up and left to hang in the prison yard for more than a half hour.
So he just slowly was like asphyxiated.
Yeah.
Oh my. I mean,
yeah.
What a punishment if he really was responsible.
Yeah, that's quite a punishment. Now, when the prison doctor examined the body, he said that he initially said that Kent was most likely killed during the first drop and suffered no conscious thought after the first tightening of the noose.
I don't know about that.
But many across the state were horrified by this whole thing because reports came out later that said after 7 minutes of strangulation from the gallows, he still had a pulse.
What?
Also, this reminded a lot of people of the 1905 execution of Mary Rogers, which she was a woman who was convicted of killing her husband. Very similar kind of rope break situation that happened there, very botched. I want to cover that case, so I'm not going to tell you a lot about it right now because I looked into it more and I was like, that's actually
interesting.
A very interesting case.
Say that because while I was Googling to find out if his initials were anywhere, I found
Rogers
that and I was going to suggest you do it.
Yep, I'm going to do it. So the unexpected errors in the execution resulted in people really getting angry. A flood of letters and telephone calls to the governor's office came out, mostly by people who were like, I don't know, maybe this is barbaric.
Maybe.
Do you think? Others were just outraged that the execution had taken place at all. Like, not even just the way it was done. They were like, no.
Because they didn't think there was enough evidence.
Well, not even that. They said, it's very clear he has mental illness. Like,
yes.
It likely influenced his behavior in some way. And in response, Governor John Meade addressed a group of press, and he said, my wish and prayer is that I may never again be called upon to undergo an experience like that of the last week. I tried, in short, to do my duty no matter how unpleasant, as I bound myself to do when I took my oath of office. The execution of Elroy Kent, like I said earlier, really became a point of rallying, basically, for death penalty opponents. And for decades, it was one of the cases that was cited as an example of the questionable morality here of executing somebody that is clearly mentally ill. Mm-hmm. And also just the barbaric way that the death penalty kind of goes about itself, you know, like especially this kind of execution. It's like, that is woo.
Yeah.
And again, you know where we all stand here. Like my
gray.
view has very much evolved way more towards against death
Yours
penalty.
really has. I'm still
way more.
pretty in the middle.
And which I think is what it should do, is it should always be evolving.
Yeah.
And it didn't help the case that there were rumors when decades after Kent had been executed, another man made a deathbed confession that said he was the one who'd murdered Delia Congdon and that he had allowed Elroy Kent to take the fall because he was an easy fall guy.
Quite literally.
It's unclear whether they investigated this further.
Or if they said,
Or
let's
if they
bury
just
that
said,
deep
it is
down.
what it is. This guy's dying. That guy's dead. Whatever. We're just going to move on.
Holy shit.
But it definitely raises a question of, oh shit, was Elroy Kent the one to murder Delia Congdon?
Because why confess?
Why?
Like, and a deathbed confession to me is always very compelling.
I know deathbed confessions are the most compelling because it's like, why?
Because I think people are in their most scared state.
Yeah,
if
they just want to release it all.
Something.
Lying at the end of your life is not, why do it?
Wow.
Yeah. And that is the case of Elroy Kent and the murder of Delia Congdon.
That's wild.
That case blew my mind.
Poor Delia. She
Poor
did nothing except be the most brightest light in her
Be
community.
this vibrant, just thriving lady.
And had overcome so much throughout her life. And that's the end she met.
Giving off pieces of her farm for people to use because she's just
cookies for the kids.
Baking cookies for school children.
Is just attacked while she's making breakfast.
Well, she's just, and all because she unlocked her door.
That's so scary.
It's so scary.
Wow.
But yeah.
What a fascinating case, though. I'm left very unsettled, I have to say.
That's how I always like to leave everybody, so that's good.
That's how you usually leave us. Wow. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys for listening. We hope you keep listening.
And we hope you
keep
it
weird. But not so weird that... Just not this weird, I guess.
Not this weird.
Yeah.
Definitely not this weird. Bye.
Bye.